Welcome to All the Stitches, a podcast about quilting, knitting, counted cross stitch, embroidery, all the crafts. My name's Colleen, and I'm coming to you from the Lakes region of New Hampshire in the United States, in the middle of a pandemic. What can we do? The only thing I know to do is to craft. I don't know about you, but over the last couple of years, I've spent a lot of time watching different podcasts. So many people that I really look forward to visiting with every week, every couple of weeks, every month. And during this quarantine period when we're missing our friends so much and families, it's really been a godsend. So what I hope to do is give back a little bit. I hope somebody out there sees this, enjoys it, and feels like they want to come back for a visit. I would love that. So what I plan to do with this program in general is to show you and talk about some of my quilting, knitting, needlework of all kinds, and whatever other crafty goodness I might be up to. But for today, I wanted to focus on my UFO quilts that I have been collecting for so long and have just sat stressing me out. You know how that is? So I finally said during this time that I'm home, open those boxes and see what you have. So that's what I've been doing, and I've been really pleased with the results. And since there's nobody to show right now, except my husband, these are the quilts that I have finished during this time of quarantine that I probably wouldn't have finished otherwise. And then for future shows, well, I have some ideas about that. And after I have my little virtual quilt show, we'll talk about that a little bit, okay? So come back and hope you enjoy it. My first quarantine quilt is kind of special. It's little Amish houses. And a little history. This little quilt was given to me by the family of a very dear friend of mine who passed away. And for many years I had it. It was almost done. It needed a little bit of border. And during this time, I finished it up. I machine quilted it and put a binding on it. And now I have a wonderful memory of Linda. The next quilt is a quilt called Carpenter's. It's called Carpenter's Apprentice. It's from a little booklet by Eva Page called Carpenter's Apprentice. And it's made with a very interesting method of making half square triangles. It's so hard to describe. Check her out on YouTube, evapagequilts.com. And a very interesting method and very accurate. And I realize these are difficult to see. At the end of this video, I will be putting up some photos, still photos of these quilts. My next one is a fun one called Scrappy Jack. That's what I call it anyway. I don't know what the name of the block is. I don't know where it came from. I bought these quilt blocks at an auction. Actually, I bought the whole center of the quilt. And I was able to put a border on it and quilt it and have a fun little throw quilt or a wall quilt. As I said earlier, these quilts are quilts that I have finished during the last 6 months during this quarantine time. And some of these I've had unfinished quilts for a long time, and I finally got around to finishing them. And some of these I started new in the last 6 months. Here's one that I had a kit put together for a long time, but I never got around to it. So finally I did. And this is, of course, the traditional shoe fly block. Really just a lap quilt, just a fun, cozy lap quilt. Has great fabrics. It was some line, which honestly I don't remember what it was, but just great old-fashioned fabrics. Here's a fun quilt. 10 years ago, actually 10 years ago this summer, I was so lucky I was able to go on an Alaskan cruise. And we saw these glaciers from the ship. And probably if anyone's gone on a cruise, they've been in that same bay looking at those glaciers. And from there we went to a town called Skagway. And they had a quilt shop, Quilt Alaska. And hanging in that shop was this beautiful quilt. Not this one, but one like it. This is so long, it's hard to show you the whole thing. But this is called the Glaciers. And it just, I think having just seen these glaciers, it was stunning because the colors were exactly what we saw. And so here is the pattern. It's by Lisa Moore. My lights are really killing these things, sorry. I'll do better. The fabric came with it, and I think it's mostly McKenna Ryan fabric. But it was so fun. This was such a fun quilt to make, and especially 10 years later. I made a baby quilt. Just a simple square and a square. Cute little prints. And it's not, some of these I've just picked up from a machine quilter, so they're not completely done, but they're close enough. Now, no quilt police allowed, so no judging either. This is just a little baby quilt that I have a little baby boy in mind, and the little animals and the little forest scenes and the snakes in the blue fabric, I think is just perfect. So no matter if you've been quilting for 30 years or more, you still make mistakes sometimes. So I cut that baby quilt out, and I thought, boy, this is a lot of sewing, a lot of cutting for this simple quilt. I cut out 2. Well, you can always use another baby quilt. This one's not quite bound yet either. I have to flip it over and stitch it down. I am never going to be able to show you all this, except at the end with the still photos. It's an Amish sampler. And the great thing about it, they're heavy. The great thing about it is I won the blocks. I won the blocks at a quilt guild. We would make a block each month with a theme. It's been 25 years or so since I won these blocks. And finally, I put them together. Recently had them quilted. And just love it. What a fun quilt. And I know who some of the makers are of the blocks, which makes it even more fun. Here's the backing. I went wild. It's an ocean waves. Urgh. See the block with the fish? That was a lot of sewing. The top was all done. I just had it quilted, put the backing together, had it quilted, and now I have to bind it. No binding on it yet. But that was a lot of years ago, and this has been sitting for a long time. This center of this quilt has been done for a few years. I put it down because it needed the border. I think there was something like 48 little 6-inch stars that went around it. This is a pattern by Deb Tucker called Yankee Pride. But you know what? I'm calling it Ice Cream Dreams because Doesn't it look like that Neapolitan ice cream? Maybe I'm just craving it. Try to give you a little better view. Oh, I got it. This next quilt is a bit of a problem to hold up because it's quite large. I'd call it an oversized queen bed size quilt. The quilt is called Medallion Star. Here's the pattern. This quilt is a free pattern online with windhamfabrics.com. They have quite a few nice patterns there. I made it bigger. I made it bigger than the pattern by a couple of rows to fit my thick mattress. And I don't call it Medallion Star. I call it Gracie Star because at the time I was working on this, we lost our lovely little chocolate lab, Gracie. So this is the block, and this is the picture of Gracie, which I printed on fabric, and I'll use this extra block as a label. So I'll do my best to show you this quilt. It would be hard to see it all, but I think you'll get the picture. All right, this wire is a pain in the neck. You can see why it's a little difficult to show you, but I'll just show you bits and pieces. Here's the border. It needed to be wider, so I kind of went wild with 4 borders. I still have to sew down the binding, but I'll get there. I'll get there in time for fall. Here's the last one. Here's the most recent quilt that I finished, and it's a statement quilt. For my next show, I'm going to be talking about the portrait quilts that I've made. I have a collection of several of them, and I'd love to talk to you about those. They're near and dear to my heart. And then beyond that, I have a plan for my third show being all knitting all the time for you knitters out there. And then beyond that, I have several ideas. So I hope you'll come back. If you like this video, I hope you will give me a thumbs up and make a comment. Put a comment below if you liked it. If you didn't like it, you can put a thumbs down, but without a comment, it won't help. And until next time, I hope all of your stitches bring joy. Bye.